Forget all you know about podcasts. We welcome you to an experience uniquely different. Please join us for our coverage of all entertainment on the fringe of society. The candles are lit, the lights are down low. It is now time to welcome our host as he steps up to the pulpit. The sacrifice has been prepared for the midnight black mass.
Welcome to the place where nothing's censored and nothing's sacred. It is I, the maniacal minister, the occult, the Reverend Dan Wilson, here for another edition of the Midnight Black Mass on the Potty Humor Network. Proud to be back here with you. Happy 2014 to you. Still rocking and rolling. My New Year's goal, not a resolution, my goal of not smoking, still going strong. No cigarettes in about 3 weeks, and already reaping the benefits. Getting some taste back, getting some smell senses back. Can breathe a little bit better, so that's nice. But, really wasn't quitting for the health reasons. I mean, they were a bonus, but just it was really more to save the money I was spending on a ridiculous habit. But the health reasons, already a nice bonus, and I already feel better. So definitely going to keep going with that. I hope everyone is moving forward. It's been freezing fucking cold here in southeast Tennessee, where the compound is located, of course, but all over the country as the Arctic blasts. No, it's not a fucking flavor of Powerade or Winter Fresh gum, but an actual weather event that has swept the nation and frozen all of our collective balls off. So just stay warm out there, people, and we'll get through this. Winter is coming. It's here. And we're just going to be glad when it's fucking over. The stereotype that evil people like myself would like the cold and drab and dank weather. Not so true. I'm not such a fan of it. I like the fall, the autumn. I like when it's a little cool outside. I like when I can smell the leaves changing in the air, that unique scent. I like the cool breeze. I like being able to wear a jacket, but I don't like having to bundle up over an open fire just to keep warm. So, like I said, hope everybody out there stays warm, don't catch no hypothermia or nothing like that. Got a big show tonight. Untouchable Jeremy Vane will be our guest on the Wildside Chronicles interview segment that we're continuing here into 2014. Hoping to have lots of the big Wildside names here. AJ Styles, I talked to him just a few weeks ago down at Anarchy Wrestling, and we're hoping he's going to be on pretty soon, and many more. So you definitely want to stay tuned to the Wildside Chronicles in 2014. Of course, most people remember Jeremy Vane as a man by the name of Jeremy V back in the Wildside days, and we tell the whole story of how that came about coming up here in our featured segment tonight. So looking forward to that. Definitely want to keep it rolling to get to Jeremy Vane, or if you don't want to listen to me bullshit, you can just hit the fast forward button and go right to him. Modern technology, you gotta love it. But if you would be so kind, I do have a few plugs I'd like to get out of the way. First involving the Potty Humor Network here at youtube.com/pottyhumor, which is our home for the moment. And will remain a home going forward, no matter what happens. Otherwise, the YouTube channel is our way to debut Potty Humor TV, which is a new project coming in 2014 that we'll tell you more about as it nears. But right now it's the primary home as we're in between websites. Had a little issue with our previous server, GoDaddy. We'll just give you the straight dirt on it. They wanted to jack up the prices after being a long-time customer. And we were able to find several other deals that were better and got more for it. We had issues getting on iTunes. There were issues with their RSS feed and the layout of the GoDaddy sites. Hey, Muji nor I are webmasters. We need something very simple and very easy to work with. Unfortunately, without having the show on iTunes, we lost hundreds of listeners. I mean, we were up to, several hundred, even a couple, like 1,200, 1,300 at times when we were on the Georgia Wrestling Radio Network. network. And still, we're doing very good when we moved over to pottyhumor.com. And unfortunately, now that pottyhumor.com is inactive and we're just using the YouTube channel, it's really put a major fucking hit in our listenership. So everybody out there, please tell your friends. Just head on over to the YouTube channel. You can always stay updated with Potty Humor news here. This channel will not be going away ever. And pottyhumor.com will be returning with a new server, hopefully very soon. In addition to that, we've got plans to resume our iTunes presence and the presence on Stitcher and other mediums where you get podcasts, because if you're not dialed into that network, you're having a real hard time reaching listeners. I mean, that's just a fact. That's how people get their podcasts. You got to be there. It's like any major brand not being in Walmart. You got to be out there for the consumer to purchase. So that's where we're going moving forward with 2014, and really excited about it, honestly. We put a lot of effort into pottyhumor.com in 2013, and we think we've really figured out ways to go to even new levels in 2014. So we're going to keep going. So enough of that. One more thing. Starting this weekend, the premiere of Last Action Zeros right here on the Potty Humor Network. That'll be hosted by All Killer No Filler, Josh fucking Miller, and Ian Sharp, the former frontman or current frontman of a band called Unspoken Triumph, former frontman of a band called With Faith or Flames, who's actually a signed touring band, and he's also now a stand-up comedian, and both guys very quick-witted, very sarcastic motherfuckers. So Last Action Zero is going to be a lot of fun. They're going to be looking at action, kung fu, sci-fi movies, cult hits of the great and not so great movies, so you definitely want to check that show out. A little wrestling news for me. You can catch me at Empire Wrestling, which is currently kind of my home promotion. Check them out over at Twitter at EmpirePW or at Facebook.com/Empire Wrestling. They run every Saturday night in Rossville, Georgia, 8:05 p.m. bell time. The address is 22 Austin Avenue in Rossville, Georgia. You can see the Rev and the Devil's Rejects there throughout the month of January and on a pretty regular basis. Now, certainly we go out and about other places, and they run weekly, so we're not there every week, but 3/4 of the time you're going to see us there, I'd say. And also, coming up February 7th, Blue Ridge, Georgia, Deep Southern Championship Wrestling. It's an 8 p.m. card with the names like AJ Styles, Corey Hollis, and more. Myself and Tank have been at it as a very last-minute surprise to that, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to attending that event and seeing a lot of old friends. Also coming up, got Platinum Championship Wrestling back at the Actors Express Theater in Atlanta, Georgia on Wednesday, February the 12th, 2014. That's also an 8 p.m. bell time. Check them out at PCW on Twitter or the same on Facebook. And right now, it's time for the Rev's Rant to make a little return. I'm going to start doing that as I wax philosophically on the world of professional wrestling. And so I want to kind of talk about this. A lot of wrestling fans listen to this show, so let's talk about things that are inside the industry, because even if you're not a wrestler, frankly, you can help with this, with what I'm about to say. If you're even not in the business, you can help. But it's really aimed at people who actually participate in the wrestling industry. And I'm seeing a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness in the business, really with two combating sets of ideals in professional wrestling. You can call it old school versus new school. You can call it traditional versus modern, liberal versus conservative, not at all in relation to politics. It's totally different, but you could call it whatever you want to call it. Given recent public displays of this contention, I think we've seen the little deal with Gunner and $5 Wrestling. Like, that's been an issue that's gotten a lot of public attention. We saw, like, Jim Cornette and the ROH fans kind of going back and forth. And, I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding in these scenarios, and these disagreements really could be avoided. And it could help wrestling, possibly, if maybe we could just try to understand one another a little more. I think that's really my point here. I don't think that means that everybody in the business falls into a new school or an old school or whatever you want to call it, right versus wrong, some people even say. But I assure you, everybody's aware of what's going on. And if you're a fan that follows the business at all, if you're a wrestler, certainly, if you're inside the business, a promoter, whatever, you know about this. It's really like two different groups of people, because if you came in and got trained in the old ways, you learned a totally different style versus what you learn now, which certainly gets a lot of criticism for not being quite so thorough. But to look at it and try to understand it from the younger perspective, because now I'm kind of falling into the older perspective, and the older you get, the harder it is to understand the younger generations. But look, we're like a whole generation now past the popularization of the internet. So it's no longer a unique form of communication, but it's the way our culture as a whole chooses to both communicate and get information. Now, there are people in the wrestling industry, some now power players in major organizations, that have never actually participated in pro wrestling when it was a closed business. So that means everything they know about wrestling comes from an era after kayfabe had been blown completely out of the water by, love him or hate him, the single most successful wrestling promoter of all time, Vince McMahon. Now, frankly, these people, whether they be the writers in WWE, whether they be promoters who started a promotion and became successful, whether they be a TV company that bought a wrestling promotion, etc., etc., they didn't learn wrestling the way it used to be. They didn't learn it the right way, but they didn't learn it at all. Let's face it, egos aside, humility aside, there's a lot of things that the current generation doesn't comprehend. Small facets, nuances, little pieces of the art form that the kayfabe generation are just absolute masters of. Most time, I find my philosophies lie in agreement with the old school camp, like 95% of the time, usually. It's pretty high, so I really kind of fall on that side philosophically, but not age-wise, and that's important. Gypsy Joe is my uncle, as if you don't know. I was all about old school wrestling as a kid, and when I got into the business, that's how I wanted to learn. I studied the old timers meticulously and asked questions in a locker room and picked their brains and put in time and hours to learn those ways the best that I could, so I could do my part to make sure that I contributed in a way that was respectable to the industry and to make sure those traditions continued. Now, most of the old timers, no matter how stodgy or grumpy or downright bitter they might come off, they actually do know what they're talking about. So that's the kind of thing that I think we're losing, that we're having a disconnect here. It's like I think the young guys, I don't think they want to listen, and I've been the young guy, so I understand. I don't think they want to listen to the old timers, even when they're right, because some of them, and it's a very few, but hey, like they say, it takes one quote unquote bad apple to spoil the bunch. If one guy is just a total fucking dick to somebody and they don't offer anything constructive, then that person might not take it so well, even though the other guy's right. So um, I'd say Jim Cornette is an example of the opposite of that. Like he's got a podcast now, and you can listen to it. Of course, I learned a lot from just listening to that guy talk. He's a real master of explaining and defending his stance on any piece of criticism he's given. So if he's there to just really show off how much he knows and like how much that level of experience trumps what is kind of the general level of acceptability on the indies and even more of the prevailing opinions of the internet wrestling community. I'm not trying to shit in anybody's Cheerios. It's just as a guy who's kind of stuck in the middle of these two generations in my age range, a basic grasp of reality and psychology will tell you that most of those old ways, if you really listen to how they're broken down, actually make more sense. But it's just that some of the folks trying to impart that, they're failing to reach the ones that need to hear it the most. So, but you got to understand their perspective too. Folks who have been stuck in their ways a long time, they're not real open to changing them, and they're even worse at convincing somebody else to change their ways to be like them. So you couple that with a very PC generation of today who gets kind of a reputation for being thin-skinned and entitled, and you have two camps who, well, seemingly will remain at odds for eternity. I'm not saying these young whippersnappers are always wrong, and as fucking annoying as they can be sometimes when they don't get the whole story and run with things, the internet crowd is also not always wrong. It also doesn't mean that all the grouchy old vets are always wrong, nor are they always right. It just seems to me that the two generations, the viewpoints, whatever, They're failing to reach each other on an epic level. Like tradition would tell you the prior generation should lead the guard in passing down the way things are done. Does that mean that the youth doesn't have something to offer? Of course it doesn't, because without that enthusiasm, that energy, that passion for it, that really you can only achieve at its fullest when you're young, you lose the heart and soul of wrestling. But the old timers still got to be there to rein that in and point it in the right direction. And so that's where we need to meet in the middle here. So where can we find a common ground? Where can we take all the positives that we all bring to the table and use them to better the sport? All I see is two sides arguing, and while I might agree with one more than the other, I have to say I see a dismissiveness from both sides. It's a little disturbing and unfortunately reflective of a country at large right now. If we aren't able to consider others' viewpoints, then we're really crafting an illusion around us and calling it reality. We don't have to agree with an opposing viewpoint to try and find some understanding in it. So in day-to-day life, it's just because we all share the same fucking rock and would like our time here to be enjoyable. But in wrestling, it's because we're at a fairly unprecedented period in the sport's history, and we have to find a way to move forward. We aren't moving forward, and we haven't been for quite some time. So let's try to understand one another a little better. And more guys of like my age range who fall somewhere in the middle of this and have seen both and interacted with both, maybe we're kind of the key that unlocks this next phase of wrestling. So if we can get the new kids to learn the old ways, and even just a little bit to get the old timers to involve to the modern day, then maybe pro wrestling can possibly stumble on the secret to surviving the current times and thriving again in the future. That's all for the Revs Rant this week. Coming up right after the break, we've got the Untouchable Jeremy Vane, or Jeremy V as the Wildside fans remember him, on the Wildside Chronicles for part 1 of a multi-part series. And right now, before we go to break, gonna play a little Pantera for you. This song actually goes back to the power metal album that gets a lot of shit and criticism from people who were critics of Pantera, because they say this is a hair metal album. So I'm gonna play this tune for you, and you can tell me if you think this was a hair metal song. This album was like circulated in the underground. It was never a major label release. So we're gonna go ahead and play this track. And you tell me what you think. Did this sound like anything Poison ever put out? Sounds more like Judas Priest to me, and that's never a bad thing. After all, they are the metal gods. Jeremy Vane coming up right after Pantera here on the Midnight Black Mass. listening to the Potty Humor Network. Right now, it's the Rebs Midnight Black Mass, and we got a hell of an archive for you over at youtube.com/pottyhumor. Got interviews with Hank Williams III, Phil Anselmo from Pantera, Unknown Henson, Gideon Smith, Suave Rabe from Gigi Allen's band, Jason Aaron from Marvel Comics, and of course, the whole array of the Wildside Chronicles with former NWA President Bill Barron, former World Tag Team Champion Corey Chavis, the mad shitter himself, White Trash, and so much more. Tank and Iceberg, more recent interviews that were very popular. Definitely want to check those out. YouTube.com/pottyhumor. Also, if you like sci-fi, if you like kung fu, if you like action movies, check out our new show, Last Action Zeros, hosted by Josh Miller and Ian Sharp. And also, if you like comic books, definitely check out me and Muji's weekly comic review at Get Your Pulls. All of this brought to you by the Potty Humor Network, and Potty Humor TV is coming in 2014. That's youtube.com/pottyhumor.
And we're back here on the Midnight Black Mass. And at this time, I would like to welcome our special guest to the program here on another edition of our famed Wildside Chronicles segment, the one and only Untouchable Jeremy Vane. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Jeremy is a dear friend of mine for many years. Wildside fans probably remember him better as Jeremy V. Jeremy Vane is actually the name that you use now, which is funny. There's actually a story even behind that. As when you debuted in Wildside, that was your name, Jeremy Vane. And, of course, we wanted you to be a baby face and thought that name really didn't fit. So we shortened it, and all those years later, you came back to it. But regardless, man, just what's been going on with you lately? How's everything going? How's life?
Well, life is pretty good, I guess. I can't really complain. Christmas with the family was nice. Staying busy, work-related stuff, and APW keeps me extremely busy.
That's right. For those that don't know, alternative pro wrestling, Jeremy's very heavily involved in the office and official responsibilities there for that company. He's done a great job at developing talent for the Southeast for many years now. You still there, Jeremy?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway.
That was a pitch to me, and I failed to pick up on that. And by the time I did, it was a little too late. So, obviously I do stay plenty busy with that. It's only one show a week, but you just would not believe the amount of time. It's not so much the work, because I enjoy it, but the time it takes out of your life.
Yeah, it will, man. Any sort of promotional responsibility where you're involved in the office, and then you take, like, all the boys calling you 24 hours a day, want to know what the fuck they're doing on the show.
Oh, my God.
And the other. It's quite a pain, but it's a labor of love, as they say. So let's talk about Wildside. Let's wind that clock back a little bit. That's why we're here, at least initially. I probably will have you on for a few episodes of the show to just say, because you and I are pretty tight, and I think there's a lot just about the business in general that we can talk about, psychology, philosophies, various things. But let's wind that clock back. The year was 2001, if I'm not mistaken, possibly late 2000. It was not long after I came in that you debuted. To tell us the story of that.
Yeah, I had my first match June 9th, 2001, and I was trained by Stone Mountain, former Wildside heavyweight champ. There's a Wildside reference for you. And we did the first match on a little spot show that they promoted, but they weren't really aggressively seeking other bookings. And And I'm like, I'm trained, right? I can wrestle? And they said, yeah. So I just started going anywhere and everywhere. And I think that freaked Stone Mountain out. I had about maybe 6 matches in me, if that, and I came to Freedom Fight 2001, which was the first War Games in Cornelia. And, you know, people tell stories about, oh, man, it was standing room only. But that night, that building didn't have any standing room. It was incredible. And, you know, here I am, 160 pounds, sitting there in the stands. I had talked to Bill before the show, and, you know, I was starting the following Friday. So we had established all that. And I'm sitting there watching this show that's so major league, and it's just so intimidating. All I could remember thinking is, I'm just not ready for this the whole time. So, you know, when I did get a little bit of success there, it was so rewarding. Just because of that night, sitting there watching something that you think that you could never be a part of.
Yeah, and I often wonder, man, I really do. I often wonder what goes through a lot of other wrestlers' heads in that respect, because just as we go from town to town, from show to show, from promotion to promotion, they're certainly not all like Wildside was, or even Anarchy is today. I mean, you run into a lot of rinky-dink operations that are just fly-by-night, mom-and-pop deals, most of the time ran by people that don't know what they're doing. You know, now, because of great things that people like Bill Behrens have done and just over the years promoting that professionalism, it's certainly spread. There's a whole lot more fucking places you can go work now that are of a professional grade than there were back in 2001. Wildside was pretty much it. So we take it to heart when we say it really was an operation that we were impressed by, because it was that professional, it was that major league, and it was so far above everything else.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy yesterday he works several places, has a good reputation everywhere, and never really had any kind of stay in Cornelia. And, you know, he had said that, you know, a lot of people there kind of as if it is above certain things. And my response to him was, well, I mean, it is. Names, and, you know, and that's not tooting my horn. If anything, that's, you know, that pads my resume saying that I was part of that. But, you know, I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, man.
Well, you were talking about you were talking to a guy who had a pretty good reputation, but never really been there. I think you were kind of getting at that they didn't really see what all the fuss was about.
Yeah, and I just explained to him, you know, name another promotion anywhere in any state that has been consistently that good for that long. Because what's it, like 15 years now? Yeah, I've been around 12, almost 13, so, you know, I don't know how long wrestling's been in Cornelia, but it's just because, you know, there were a few great workers that were there at the beginning. Like I know Rick Michaels. I'm not sure who all was there at the beginning, but when I was there, Rick Michaels was like the Ric Flair of Wildside in my eyes. And, you know, and I mean that in a good way, you know, not like drunk Ric Flair the way people talk about him now. But he was that legendary guy there. In my eyes, he was just that good of a worker. And when you'd get in the ring with him, you know, he could call in the ring and just, you would be so amazed. And a lot of what I know now came together in those matches with him and a guy that, you know, he pretty much taught, which is Rain Man, or Corey Chavis, as he's
Corey
now known.
Chavis, to those who are not part
but
of
this
the
is
Wildside
Chronicles, so we're going to call him Rain Man. His mama call him
That's
Rain
right.
Man, I'm going to call him Rain Man.
Damn straight. Well, it's interesting in those early days because you had this whole long run as a babyface, and then we turned you heel, and you had a whole long run doing that. And it's like you were probably the consummate babyface for those couple of years there in Wildside. I mean, I remember when you came in on the Friday nights, and it's funny that you say you debuted at Freedom Fight 2001, actually, because it was a year later.
No, I was at
Freedom
the
Fight
stands
2002.
at Freedom Fight.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That you showed up first there. That you first visited the arena at that show, and then a year later, it's where you really made your mark in the company. But we saw you on a Friday night. I remember Steve Martin saying, "Oh man, that guy! Look at that long hair." And you could sell your ass off, which is funny because you were trained by Stone Mountain, and nobody really put two and two together. I mean, we all love Stone Mountain for damn sure. But his selling wasn't his strong suit, He was a big monster, and we pretty much told him not to sell a damn thing. And you were just the total opposite, You were just a punching bag, and you could just get so much sympathy out of it. Talk a little bit about where you learned to sell, like pretty much at that level of experience. Like, how did you come to realize that it was so important? Because so many guys at that level of experience just don't fucking know how to sell.
Oh, you guys act like I come in thinking I'm just going to outsell everybody. No, it was nothing like that. I mean,
no.
No, it was dumb luck. I mean, it was, if anything, it was years of watching. And, I guess, and, I can remember doing a bump and feed, like as if you were bumping and feeding for somebody's comeback on my trampoline, imitating Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard when I was little. And it was the same as it is in the ring, only, it hurts a lot worse in the ring, especially nowadays. And I'm not saying that and I'm talking like really young. I mean, less than 10. And I'm not saying that to sound conceited or whatever. It was dumb luck, but I did that right. And I was smart enough to latch on when people were talking about how I was selling. I was like, oh, shit, well, that's what they like. I'll show them selling. That was my goal, because, and I got to work with a lot of great people just because they liked the way I sold. So, I mean, it was no real skill that I was taught, although I do want to speak up for Stone Mountain a little bit. Now, I know Iceberg, shit all over their matches, and I remember sitting all over those matches, too, in my head. I never, would have been disrespectful enough to say it back then, but, I can outrun both of those guys still, so I will. But Stone Mountain taught me how to bump, and, there's a few guys that come from that, I don't want to say that school, because it wasn't really a school, but that camp of guys, and guys that we taught, how to bump in the beginning. There's a group of guys that bump like that. There was a guy, Silo Storm, out of South Carolina. I don't know if you remember him. He did a lot of Friday nights and a few Wildside TVs with the Urban Assault.
Oh, I remember him. He, we had high hopes for him, and then something happened to him. I don't remember what.
Yeah,
he got hurt or got a job or, one of those deals where the guy's there and then they're not and they don't ever come back.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's a good friend of mine to this day, and we train together, and, he bumps like that. People, God, I hate to say anything positive about myself because it sounds so dickish, but the way I bumped for so many years, I feel like it's slowing down now because it hurts a lot now. But
you were a fucking bumping fool like that. Like, you definitely got the psychology part of what it takes to make the other guy look good. Like, as a babyface, during that heat, selling your ass off, and then as a heel, bumping your ass off all over the place, like with no, I mean, you would. I mean, when it was time for that comeback, dude, you're pinballing it. And so I can only imagine that it does take its toll after a while.
Yeah, it sure does. But, that snapping bump that, people go, ooh, for, not a lot of people do it, and there's a lot of us that come to that camp. And a little trivia for you, there's one guy, young, babyface on the Anarchy roster now doing great things that learned how to bump from us? Can you guess who it is?
Learn how to bump from you?
Yeah. Me and Silas Storm. Which
And he's
from
a babyface on Anarchy now?
Yes.
Billy Buck?
Yep.
I would say. He's got that
exactly.
style, man.
Like, he was
it's kind of
so good in training.
Hey, Billy's a fucking
and not taking
talent,
credit
man.
for that. If I'm gonna take credit for anything of Billy, it was discovering how talented he was long before anybody else wanted to see it.
You damn sure did, and just now he's really just now getting his due as far as like being considered a top hand down there. And I think for a long time he's been ready to go into that spot, and he's been there just patiently waiting. Always had a great attitude, always ready to deliver the goods. And man, when they handed him the ball, like they were talking about him and Bobby's stuff, were match of the year contenders. Pretty much everybody I've talked to has.
That match was I would say it's one of the top. I don't want to overstate it, but I would definitely say it's in the top 10 matches I've ever seen on the Indies.
You talking about the one they just did at Season's Beating?
Yes, the I Quit match was fucking
it's
phenomenal, and they've been tearing it up for like a year, every big show, and anytime they step in the ring together. Amazing stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, tape traders, aficionados out there. I guess tapes exist anymore, but whatever the fuck you trade, digital files, DVDs, what have you. We're talking about Billy Buck and Bobby Moore, the Hit for Hire, two guys that really came into their own in 2013. Had a series of matches down at Anarchy Wrestling, and you can check it out there on YouTube. Just search their names on YouTube, and you should be able to find them. But those are some fantastic matches, and Billy is a student of Jeremy's in many ways, so that's why we were talking about it. But anyway, who were some of your favorite opponents to work with during that babyface run?
Rain Man, Jason Cross, right off the bat. Slim J. Although they tried to run him as heel, and he just, people loved all the shit he did. I mean, looking back now, at the time, I was just like, it was so frustrating. Not that I was ever, like, bitter or, jealous. I just, we couldn't get the story of me as the baby face against him, the heel, over. It was more like baby, but we definitely, back to that freedom fight match in 2012, or 2012. What year was that? 2002.
2002.
Yeah. We made a name for ourselves together in that building. And, he went on to do great things right after that. He did a lot of big stuff. And I think, I'd like to think a lot of it, given the time frame, may have, came from that match. Because, nothing I did in that match was spectacular. I mean, I held up my own. I'm not trying to be self-depreciative, but man, you look at the spectacular stuff that Slim J did in that match and tell me you wouldn't want to go booking,
Yeah, well, you both really broke out in that match because you were pretty much an underneath guy who we had some plans for, but you were on the fast road to nowhere as far as the push. Like, you weren't in the mix, you didn't have, like, you were like a guy, and because I was in the office at the time, so I know exactly where you were on the card. You were a guy that was like, okay, this guy's going to be somebody down the line, so we really just don't need to fucking bury him underground. We just need to sit him here and see what he does for a while. And so that was the deal there. And then Slim was another guy. We were fucking around. We gave him the probation officer gimmick. We're like, let's see, this little flippy kid. He can do some amazing stuff, but he looks like a child, so how are we going to sell this? And we did the whole M&M deal and gave him a cop to bring him to ringside in handcuffs.
Pops, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he come off as a jerk, but, once the bell rang, it was hard to boo him. But,
that goes for any guy.
And I didn't realize when I said they that I was talking about you at the time, but hey, There might be a lot of that conversation.
There probably will be. You probably don't even know how much of a fucking hand I had on your career.
Oh, I do. I absolutely do. And, you know, I remember, you know, getting advice from you every Friday night back in the day. You know, that's before you know, quit doing house shows. And
TV only, baby.
Right. But, you know, I remember getting advice back then from you and Andrew. Like, we're like the first guys to give me advice. And, I mean, Steve Martin and Rick Michaels, two guys, you know, those two guys, it was kind of their job to make sure the talent, you know, was getting an education. But, you know, you guys just, you know, were doing your jobs and went out of your way to help me. And I never forgot that, never have, give credit to this day. Because I haven't had, you know, a world of success, but I've made most of my dreams come true, and I've done it with the stuff I've learned there.
Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, a lot of us, you know, we may not ever have that big job or that international fame, but, you know, we did all right for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if it ended tomorrow, I'm happy. As a matter of fact, that's
absolutely. I mean, I don't like some of the money, but as far as like creative fulfillment on the shit that I wanted to do, as an artist, as fucking douchey and pretentious as that sounds, like I definitely got to do that.
Absolutely, and you know, I think long after my in-ring career is over, I plan to do that at APW. You know, and the only thing that could, you know, there's only one thing that's out of my hands that could ever, you know, end that. Knock on wood, you know, the business could drop out tomorrow, you know. But if things go the way they are, you know, there's, you know, only politics could ever end that. And that would be like, now, you know, the mayor deciding to do something different with the building.
Now, there was a time in Wildside where a lot of guys were getting picked up and a lot of guys were traveling. Like, I'm just curious, did you ever have any flirtations? I think we all have our stories where it's like we got offers that maybe weren't the offers that we wanted, but we didn't take them because we were like, fuck that, and we probably should have. Did you have any encounters like that?
You know, there's a couple of the WWE shots that I you know, couldn't do because of a short notice, you know, the extra spots. And, you know, I've always kind of kept this a secret since 2000, whatever year the WrestleMania was in Atlanta. Because, you know, as a worker, I'm kind of ashamed to say it around other workers, I guess. But first time ever you're getting an exclusive. The day before, like, I bought tickets for me and the kids for WrestleMania because, like, I took them to the Rumble. And, you know, I don't normally do the WWE shows. I mean, you know, not that I'm not, you know, really enthralled when I go sitting there learning and watching how easy they make it look. But, you know, I just don't normally do it because they're so damn expensive. But, you know, I took them to the Rumble, and that's when they announced that Mania was going to be in Atlanta. So I bought tickets for me and the kids, like, in November. As soon as they went on sale, spent like $600. Well, the day before WrestleMania, I was coming back from a show in Warner Robins, and JT Talent called me and said, the WWE is about to call you. They need extras for WrestleMania. And, you know, I had about 10 minutes before my phone rang. And I knew, like, I was through, like, chasing the big time when I made the decision not to answer the phone. Because there was no way I could tell them no. But, like, you know, the kids were looking forward to it, and I was looking forward to taking the kids. Like, you know, you'll never get a chance to do that, you know, while they're kids again, you know, and for that cheap, you know, in your backyard. And that, I don't call that a regret, but that was a miss, as you mentioned.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand. And I'd say there you probably closed the door at that point on any hopes of of doing that.
Right. Well, I mean, they don't. That's why I didn't answer the phone. They don't know. I could have been at work. Unless they listen to your podcast. But hey, if so, that's not a bad thing either.
But you never know.
Hey, no, I'll get the job, and it'll be like 5 years down the road. This will come out.
Yeah, you'll piss somebody off, and they'll bust out the coffee.
Yeah. Oh well, this guy that you got booked to be an extra. He said this. Nah, but I mean, can you see what I mean? Like I've been ashamed to like say that around the guys, because who wouldn't kill?
Because they would give you endless shit.
Who wouldn't kill for that spot? But it was like this. They're not picking up any guys, from something they see at WrestleMania. Nobody's looking for talent at WrestleMania. And it's just, it was one of those things where it would have been a good payday, and it would have been amazing. But, kids, and, that's something I've got with them, and, I just...
Yeah, I mean, like, this wrestling thing's all well and good, but sometimes just, like, being a man and having your responsibilities are important, too.
Right. And my wife offered to take them, because she didn't want a ticket as much as they cost. She was like, no, So she offered to take them, and I was like, don't make it harder. But, I did, and, then they just kept calling. It was terrible. The one time that you don't want them to call. And, the money would have just about paid for the tickets, too. That's... Kick myself for that. Let's move on.
Hey man, like I said, you did the right thing as a dad, and like I say, if you were pretty much winding things down, then there was no need to feel bad about it. But you're smart.
But I did give them Jacob Ashworth's number.
So you did what?
I did give them Jacob Ashworth's number.
Oh, so you're the one to blame.
Yeah, hey, man. Somebody's got to look out for him, even if he don't do it for himself.
There's some really hilarious, and I love Jacob. Like, I shouldn't even talk any shit about Jacob, because I had a real embarrassing moment with him one time that we might talk about on a future edition.
Yeah, future edition.
With you. But
right, I guess.
There's some really hilarious stories. Apparently, he's a huge Tyler Perry fan. And Tyler Perry was at WrestleMania, and that's all you need to know.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Ask Case Rockwell about that one.
Oh, man.
Apparently, he lost his mind. Apparently, Jacob saw Tyler Perry and his entourage walking down the hall. And he, of course, was just like, went up there like he's one of the boys, like shakes his hand and shit.
Oh.
And apparently Ace lost his mind, and it was pretty hilarious.
There's a bazillion Jacob Ashworth stories. He's a good kid, and I love him. And, my only trainee to ever make it all the way through, And not that Billy Buck didn't. It's just that I didn't always train at the place where he was training. And, I mean, when I'd go there, I'd work with him.
Yeah, I mean, you had to be pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, and Jacob, he's very good. He's just, he's hot-headed and, thinks or speaks before he thinks. And it's been,
sometimes I think just identity issues of like what he wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. Well, anyway, moving on. We're like, this is very Jeremy V of you, because I'm trying to talk about your career and you want to fucking talk about everybody else.
Well, damn it. I don't, if you're listening for me to put myself over, it's probably on something that I learned or, overheard somebody else being told. Or,
I'll be here to put you over. Don't worry about that. I'll put you over. You just answer the questions.
Good deal.
So, like, let me ask this: what was your favorite, like, of all the matches in Wildside, either from the babyface run, from the heel run? What was your absolute favorite match, and why? And why was it your favorite?
Oh wow! Does this include Anarchy too, or just the Wildside era?
Well, I'm really focusing on Wildside, but if you want to include Anarchy, you can.
Well, we can do both. I mean, we'll do Anarchy Chronicles 10 years from now. We got to save something for the big one.
Well, Anarchy's part of this Wildside Chronicles, but we usually just get to it like towards the end. And I figured if we were going to do multiple segments, that we'd.
I guess my favorite match ever at Wildside. That's a toughie. There's I guess the War Games 2003 with the Elite, and it was me, Hot Stuff Hernandez, and I think Jimmy Rave maybe.
Yep.
And Onyx.
Yep.
I believe that was the team. Wow.
Was it
against Iceberg, Rain Man, maybe?
No, Rick Michaels was on your team. No, Rick Michaels was your manager, and it was if you guys won, then Rick got 5 minutes in the cage with Bailey.
Right. Yeah. That one's hard to beat. That
was one of the best matches Wildside ever put on. Like, it's funny because we talk about those, like, in all these interviews, what was the best matches. And, of course, the Dusty and AJ thing comes up all the time when Dusty Rhodes came in. Some of the War Games come up. That one doesn't come up as much. But, like, in retrospect, that's one of the best things we ever did.
Man, I just was so honored to be, getting the finish of War Games, the main event of Freedom Fight. Here we are 2 years from the night I sat in the stands, when there was no standing room, just intimidated as hell. And then 2 years later, I'm in the main event of the same show in the cage. It was just surreal. Like, I tell you, like, I remember going over on a Mega Rumble at Wildside on a Friday night, probably, I don't know, maybe 4 months after I'd started down there. And I think I eliminated Crew Jones or something else. I forget who it was, but the pop when I went over in the Rumble was so loud. And, they only got so loud on those Friday nights, but it was so loud that I was just, so amazed. I remember going outside and, like, thanking God for it. And I remember getting all teary-eyed because I just couldn't believe that I'd got that kind of reaction in that building that, I'd sat there, at that time, that was like, 4 months earlier, intimidated as hell. And here, these people are starting to respect me a little.
Oh, yeah. I remember you working with Crew on those Fridays all the fucking time. I guess because you guys were there all the time. You were two of the guys that were at every single Friday show. And you guys had like a 2-year-long feud just exclusively on Fridays.
We'd blow it off on TV and then do it the next Friday.
You're the only guy who would show up, so we had to do something. So favorite matches, the War Games. Why? Why was it your favorite?
Just because the company thought enough of me to put me in that position, and it just meant the world to be in that company and in that position there. And it was the perfect story. Like that. That's the story that every kid grows up, playing out in their backyard, in their minds for years, and I got to tell it in real life. I mean, it's the fictional world of wrestling, but, I actually got to live that push, I want to say, start to say the Brad Armstrongish push, but, his push kind of ended, everywhere. And, I felt like I got the follow through at Wildside.
Yeah, yours continued, and I thought it was interesting that they turned you heel after all of that. What was, because you were taking a big leap. Was it a situation where you were just tired of being a babyface and ready to do the heel thing, or was it an into the unknown type of situation where you were kind of scared about it?
Well, when it was pitched to me, I don't know, I was just kind of skeptical of it. And Bill said, since you've been begging to turn heel, and I was like, I've never once said nothing about turning heel. And, I guess I was a little scared because I had worked heel several times before on spot shows with other companies. And I remember working heel, but I didn't understand anything then. And I was just, yelling shut up at the crowd and all the cliche things. Once the bell rung, I didn't know how to do anything but choke and, do my spots. So, could I do it? I felt pretty confident, but who knew? But I was definitely excited. And then the first match I got to do was with Jay Fury, and that was when he was red hot.
Oh, yeah, that was a good time.
And I knew that night that, it was going to be money from there. And he was the perfect guy because, I don't have to do anything but bump and take his shit. Not taking away from what he does or the importance of bumping and taking his shit. But that's all I had to do because I didn't need to do anything but bump, sell, steal the win. And I had heat, and that was my goal. And, I don't know, the story with him. Hell, he could have been booked the job out for the next 6 weeks, but I would have still done the match the exact same way because he had all that offense to show. Why not get it all? And I'm not saying you should always, get all your shit in, but if you're working a match with somebody that's got that much, innovative offense, I think, and you're a guy in a higher position on the card, I think you should, especially if you're going over, and if you're a heel, it's even easier, let him get all his shit in, steal the win. You'll have just as much heat and he'll gain something.
And hey, young guys out there listening to the show, I know a lot of you listen. You've been giving me feedback. Listening to the veterans that I have on here, and this is a guy who's been on both sides of the fence. He's had long runs as both a babyface and a heel. He's not one of these guys maybe one place one way or flip-flopped all the time. He definitely had a lengthy run. So there's a little bit of wisdom for you, and that's one thing I like about this also. It's a bit of education for ourselves, reflection, and a lot of other things. But, definitely I like talking about the subtle nuances of the business because certainly they're kind of a lost art. And the further you go into the future, it seems like a more lost art they are.
Yeah, and, nobody understands it anymore. I remember, almost every babyface I work with that I'm meeting for the first time that night, they are, and I'm the heel. They're insistent on giving me more. Like, oh, you need to, I think you need to do more. You need to, let's do this, And they're just being respectful, and I really appreciate it. But, I don't need to get anything. The heel never needs to get anything. As a babyface now, I realize that, you gotta get your shit. It's different as a babyface. You gotta convince them that, you're hurt and you need their help, and you're trying to fight back. And then you gotta have the piss and vinegar and the fire to make them believe when it's time to come back. And I'm veering off from your question and talking all about other stuff.
No, not really.
Steer me back.
Not really. I was just talking about the subtle nuances of the craft and how young guys can learn and how I like talking about them. And actually, before we came on the air in my little opening monologue this week, I was talking about a movement I kind of see in the business. It's a little disturbing, and we've got about 5 minutes left on the show, so I think we can wrap up talking about this. It's probably our last topic because there's probably a lot to be said on it. And then we'll come back next week if that's all right with you, because I got a whole lot more to talk about.
Absolutely. Long as
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, what I was talking about earlier in the show, right, is that I kind of see a movement more so than ever these days of like an old school versus new school mindset. It's almost like there's two groups of people that aren't even from the same industry working together. And I think the old timers are right, like 98% of the time. However, most of them have a terrible way of trying to explain it or impart it to the next generation. So they come off just as bitter old pricks. When in reality, they know what they're talking about, and everybody should be listening to them. But also, you know, there's something to be said for that youth and that untainted spirit and passion that before you get bitter and jaded, that can lead to great creativity. So I think also the old-timers, while they're always correct most all the time, could probably take a little bit of enthusiasm from the youngsters. Unfortunately, it's not what I'm seeing when I go places. I see a more divisive... Yeah, go ahead.
The problem with, you know, the young guys and their creativity is, you know, there's plenty of it, but there's a formula for a match. It's aged as older than the wrestling business. It's the same formula of almost any form of fictional entertainment. And, you know, if you stick to that formula and your match is telling a story using that formula, you will not go wrong with the crowd. And I don't care if you're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with a Ring of Honor crowd or, you know, Cornelia, Georgia. It's the same formula. There's no north, south, east, west. It's the formula. You watch WWE and it's a very, you know, each match is a very, very shortened version of that formula. It's the same thing. I mean, and if they're doing it, you know, that should be your model. Whatever they're doing, that's what you should aspire to be. And the guys adding all that creativity and veering off from the formula aren't skilled enough in their storytelling to make it work. Because if you veer, you know, it's just like driving down the road. If you veer a little to the right, you hit a pothole and some wet grass, it's gone, and you'll never get it back. You know, if you stick to that formula and concentrate on, you know, emotional storytelling and working people's emotions more so than your spot, I think your reaction will be strong. And your career will be longer. But when you're young and you're hearing that from guys like me, it's like, I remember AJ walking by me and Slim in like 2006-ish and saying, you guys are crazy. You need to quit taking those bumps on the floor. It's just not worth it, you know, and it's not necessary. And I remember thinking then, you know, we were like, yes, sir, we know, yes, sir. But I remember thinking then, you did all this stuff, and you made a name for yourself doing it. So don't tell me not to do it. But looking back now, it's because he realizes you saved those moments, you know, where we took probably 2 bumps apiece on the floor that night. You know, save that for, you know, the big match and take one big bump. Or, you know, if you're going to do that one, do just the one. But, you know, you live and you learn. And, you know, by the time the kids now that think we don't know what we're talking about learn what it's really about, if they ever do, you know, maybe their window will be closed. And that's something I try to preach now to the guys that are really talented and do have a chance. You know, the sooner you understand what I'm trying to tell you, you know, you'll have it made. And you'll have a bunch of
you're going to save your ass, that's for sure. You know, you're going to save your body. That's the one problem I think you see with a lot of guys. Most of the guys on top, that came up in the last 10 years, you know, they're influenced by like Benoit and that Japan style and shit. You guys are out there killing each other, and you know, you're 20 and you're fucking taking all the bumps, like you said, on the floor. You know, you're destroying your body by the time you get 30 and like really learn what you're doing. You've killed yourself and you don't have much shelf life left. You know, your body can only take so many bumps. And like I say, I totally agree with everything you're saying. I wish that we could see more unity on the lot, because the young guys would learn so much more if they opened up, if they got past the bitchiness of the old.
Oh man, we ran out of time. Unfortunately, we were having such a good time just shooting the shit back and forth that totally forgot we were on a recorded time limit. So that abruptly ended the interview with part one of Jeremy Vane. But fear not, Legion, he will return next week, as a matter of fact, right here with part two of his appearance on the Wildside Chronicles. You have been listening to the Midnight Black Mass. This is the Rev. Keep one foot in the gutter, one fist in the gold, two horns in the air. I'm out.